Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee joint meeting on fiscal year 2022 budget. Just want to let everyone know that this meeting is being audio and video recorded and can be seen streaming. If you want to access to it, can be had from the town's website. Information for the Zoom. Okay, so if I can, I will start it off. If we can, we have a approval of minutes for a couple of different times we had. I don't know if you want to do them individually or all in one, I'm not sure. But I'll take
Move to approve all 3 sets of minutes.
Thank you. In a second.
Second.
Okay, I don't know, take a roll call in Tim's absence, someone? Maybe Brian, please.
Sure. Rick,
Yes.
Costa,
Yes.
myself, yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Minutes are approved.
And that that requires a vote of the finance
Oh,
committee as well.
that's right. I'm sorry. No, go right ahead. My bad.
So, Mr. Hartman, you approve.
Yes, I do.
George,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
and I approve. So what do you want us to do, Andy? Print these out and scan our signatures back to you?
Yeah. Yeah. You guys have DocuSign or something that you use? Or John does, I guess, right?
John, does.
However it's easiest to get them back to us.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. Now we'll continue the discussion by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee on outstanding issues related to fiscal year 2022 operating and capital budget and the June 5th, 2021 town meeting. I guess we'll begin with the first bullet on the annual town meeting warrant.
So not much, Mr. Chairman, on the warrant. We did make the changes that were discussed at the meeting 2 weeks ago. We eliminated the article that would have created a revolving fund for the cruiser
Right.
detail fees. So those funds will simply go into the general fund from this point forward.
Okay.
We inserted a new article that would automatically designate receipts for sidewalk and pedestrian improvements, and those would go directly into the stabilization fund
Right.
that is on the warrant directly preceding that article. So if town meeting approves the stabilization fund, we would then take up the next article, which would dedicate funds directly to that stabilization fund. There wouldn't be any after the fact moving money around or anything like that. There were, excuse me, a couple of typos in Articles 14 and 15. Those are the enterprise budgets for South Essex Sewer and for the Water Department. They were minor changes, and if I had done the math, I would have noticed it. So otherwise, nothing has changed on the warrant or on the motions, just those items.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? No. All right, then I guess we'll move on to the operating and capital budgets and where those are at.
So really, well, a couple of updates, I suppose. We did adjust the revenue side of the budget by increasing 3 revenue categories: our general fee revenues by $20,000, motor vehicle excise by $15,000, and the meals excise by $30,000. We had talked about all those at the meeting 2 weeks ago, so Sarah has gone ahead and made those changes on the on the revenue budget. We've included the debt service costs in the debt service budget for the pumper truck and for the public works trash truck based on a 7-year term. We did look at a lease to own, and it was not as advantageous as just doing a standard borrowing, private market borrowing. So So we would recommend sticking with the borrowing for the 2 vehicles like we did in the fiscal 21 budget for the 3 public works vehicles. The deficit at the moment stands at around $140,000. And really the outstanding issue or the outstanding decision that needs to be made is how to close that deficit. We recommend, as I mentioned in my memo from last night to the board and the finance committee, we recommend drawing $100,000 out of the capital stabilization fund that would cover the debt service for the vehicles. And then the balance, the 40,000 or so, would just fall to taxation. If we're in a position in the fall where we feel like we've got available funds, we could always apply more to it before we set the tax rate. But we think that applying 100,000 now from capital stabilization solves the challenge in front of us and allows us to move forward and prepare everything for town meeting.
Yeah, Andy, how did you come up with the 100,000 recommendation?
So the debt service is about 90,000, Sarah, I think, for the public works vehicles.
Yep, that's correct.
So we took the 90 plus a little bit more, which would cover for the borrowing for this year, for fiscal 22 for the new vehicles.
Well, yeah, what's, would be the debt service of the new vehicles and the 3 vehicles we borrowed from last year?
Sarah, do you have that
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up.
within reach?
So the debt service for the DPW equipment is 89,250. And then for the DPW equipment and fire pumper we're estimating 16,000. So 100,000 is a little less than the combination of the 2.
So would it make sense to do that total under the rationale that, previously these vehicles would have been bought from, capital stabilization or free cash or whatever, they were put into the finance, put into the operating budget. And for FY 22, we're going to then use capital stabilization to pay that borrowing cost. Is creating that sort of one-to-one symmetry helpful or detrimental in terms of the bond review that will go on if we are successful with the municipal complex?
So Sarah, I don't know if you have a thought on that. I don't think it's substantial enough that the rating agencies are going to look at that very hard.
I don't think it is. So our financial advisors asked, Belinda went through a review with them not too long ago, and they did inquire if we were planning on taking any money out of our stabilization funds, just to kind of give an input as to how that would affect us. And when I went over the numbers with them, they weren't that concerned when it was the $90,000 to $100,000 range, especially since we are still in another warrant article putting money into the capital stabilization fund to offset it.
I could just put in my 2 cents. I think Middleton is in a very favorable position because we are not cutting back on services as many cities and towns are doing. And we have built up these reserves for a rainy day. And as I said last week, you know, we're in the middle of a hurricane and we're not draining our reserves. We're just taking a little bit. And I think that's a feather in our cap as opposed to a black mark.
So
I would agree.
I
Yeah,
would
still
be-
this expense is recurring. I mean, we're gonna have it again in FY '23 and '24, right? So how likely is it that we're gonna be able to shift that expense out of stabilization next year back on into the tax rate? Or local receipts, or, you know, whatever are we
Free
expecting
cash
to
or
recover?
anything else, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
We're just
for
anticipating
FY
local
23,
receipts, right?
hopefully the rooms excise tax will have some recovery
That's what we spoke on.
so that, you know, it won't be, you know, 100 or 5,000 or whatever of recovery because it wasn't that high to begin with.
yeah.
But it will be higher than the 60 that's, you know, in the budget now. So some of that can go from there. I think the meals tax will continue to grow. So there is some optimism to say that at
Right.
least some of that can go back into the operating budget, whether it's the whole thing. You know, it'll depend on a lot of factors. I don't think we can accurately predict now.
If we're able to take some of the opera dollars to backfill lost revenue, i.e. meals and lodging taxes, the two largest revenues that we have lost out on. If we're allowed to do that, you know, without DLS giving any clarity on how that will happen, I would say the timing likelihood is that's going to come into our next year free cash calculation, that the dollars will just come over as a post fiscal year recoupment of the revenue. And if that's the case, we should see those dollars, Costa and John and George, in next year's free cash calculation, which
Okay.
will give some relief to the point that you're making, John, of do we have the ability next year to take that from capital reserve and put it back into budgetary and or free cash?
I think we all have
Seems
to-
like,
things are gonna get better.
Your ears to your lips to God's ears. So
yeah, it seems like a reasonable risk today. Because, you know, I agree with George. I am a little bit optimistic that things are turning around. But as he says, we're in a little bit of a pinch right now. So, but I guess I would support that. Whether it's
So
100,000 or a more precise number.
The total would be $105,175.
and 38 cents.
Potentially. I
And
didn't
to-
round out with the decimals.
And to be honest, knowing, you know, roughly what it was, from our perspective, it was just easier to say 100,000 rather than be precise. We don't have a particular objection if you want to get to that level of precision.
So I'll move that we use 105,175 from the capital stabilization fund for the FY 22 budget.
Okay.
What was the number again, Costa? I'm sorry.
100.
105, 175, if I got Sarah's number correct.
That's what I have, Costa.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. All right, then, Brian, if you would, we'll take the board's roll call vote.
Okay. Tim?
I didn't hear, I
Oh, I
wasn't,
didn't see Tim there. I'm sorry.
I just came in, so I'll abstain.
Okay. Costa?
Yes,
Myself, yes. Rick?
Yes.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Richard.
Do we need to vote on that particular movement, or just the finance board just accepts the overall budget at this point? because we haven't done that yet at all.
Right. Yeah, you can do that as a single omnibus motion, I guess, whether it's tonight or at a future meeting.
Why don't we, if the board's comfortable, why don't we just go ahead and accept the FY22 budget? Someone can make that motion.
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
All right, so Johnny,
Yeah, I approve that.
George,
Yes, I approve.
Jason,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
and I am in favor. Unanimous.
So that means that remaining 35,000 or so
35
will be used
before
from the levy capacity.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Correct. And we still have more excess levy than the policy calls for.
Correct.
And if there is any further clarity from Division of Local Services prior to town meeting, we can appropriately determine if we want to do something different leading into that.
Yeah, even right before town meeting, we can shift the sources of funding around if we want to.
Yep. And on that point, Sarah, are you hearing anything out of DOR on that?
Nothing. They sent out their year-end memo today for things to keep in mind as you're starting to think about closing your books. And all it said is that we're still awaiting guidance from the state regarding the CARES Act, FEMA, and the new funds as well. So everybody's still in a holding pattern, waiting for guidance from the federal level.
I don't know if your Michelle might know anything about, would the guidance likely be the same for municipalities as regional school districts?
You would think.
Yes, I would suggest they will be. Just never know for sure.
Yeah, because, in Masco's case, if this federal dollars come and then end up flowing into their E&D, it will exceed the 5% maximum. So basically, Masco would give back money to the towns and not really get the benefit of the aid that it's, the underlying reason for giving this money. It will just flow back to the town.
Unless Masco does what they did in a previous year, was make additional expenditures before they completed their E&D calculation. There's always a way around that. Yeah, yes, that's exactly what they did.
That has happened, in the past. It has not happened under the current, CFO.
Well, he's been CFO for a year, so.
Two.
So.
1 year end. You're right.
Hey, one other item. I actually mentioned this today to Sarah when I was actually in Memorial Hall signing the bond anticipation note documents. No, obviously town meeting this year and last year was a later date due to the pandemic. And that has been because there's been a lot of confusion, concern, and so forth. But the thing I've actually liked about this is we are getting to a decision-making process on many of these items when we have much more clarity. Usually we're making some earlier decisions without fully understanding Masco numbers, where the schools are, and even sometimes Essex Tech. And so I know our charter clearly states when our town meeting is to be held. We've been able to delay it 2 years in a row due to the pandemic, and God willing, we're not in the middle of a pandemic next town meeting period. But I just dropped for conversation, nothing we have to actually really even chew on right now. But I personally like the later town meeting date. I think it actually gives a little bit more runway to actually make some more informed decisions in the early part of the budget process. So I don't know what people actually think about that. And I know we, last couple of years, we've talked about different charter changes.
I would agree with that, Brian. And
George, you and I are agreeing an awful lot lately.
I think that's one of the reasons we need the charter commission. You know, the charter has served us well for, I forget, what was it, 1976? And it's time to look at it again. I mean, I was vice chair of the original charter commission, and then there were changes that I would make today that I wouldn't have made back then.
It's a much different town today than it was back then.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question on the omnibus budget. If we're going to be using capital stabilization as a source of funding, is it going to require a 2/3 vote to pass the budget?
Yes, it will.
Okay. All right, so we're all aware of that. Okay, good.
Yeah, just like last year, was it when we used
2 years
the
ago.
sped stabilization for 130 some odd thousand?
Correct.
That'll be the case in the future if we're doing anything on expending dollars for sidewalks, for example.
Mhm.
Correct. Yeah, they did change it so that transfers into stabilization are now a simple majority. That used to be a 2/3 as well, so that's a simple majority now, but any funding coming out is still a 2/3.
Okay.
All right, do I need to ask for a motion to, is there a vote to use the round number of 35 from the excess levy? Or is that,
No, there's no need to,
Okay.
no need to vote that.
okay,
So we will, we'll put together a final spreadsheet of, by warrant article of all of the appropriation amounts, all the financial amounts, and get that to the finance committee so that you can use that in preparing your report for town meeting and for taking your motions, your votes on the articles in the next coming week or
Thanks,
2
David.
weeks.
very good. Okay. And if that, does that sum it up, if I'm not mistaken here? Is that, I don't know if there's any more discussion for revenue sources, or I think we did that.
We did that.
Nothing else from our end, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Anything else from the board? Nothing?
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you very much, sir. So moved, adjourned. Thanks, everyone.